Hello, welcome back. We continue in our unit on theism. We're coming to the final section of our discussion of the problem of evil. We looked at David Hume's solutions and responses. We looked at the free will solution and responses, and we still haven't found an intellectually satisfying answer about why, if God is all good and all powerful, there's evil in the world, both moral and natural evil. The ironic solution to the problem of evil is a response to the responses. It's an attempt to go deeper into an explanation of the problem of evil. And I'm just going to read through it and discuss as we go. This solution is going to say the problem of evil is an intellectual problem. It's not just a problem of suffering or of pain. It's a problem for human beings as rational beings. We are rational and not just emotional or practical. We want to know why there's evil. So the concern is to know why there's evil, not merely how to remove it practically. We don't want to just get rid of evil. If we got rid of evil today, we would still want to know, why was it there in the past? Why did everyone before us have to die? As such, as an intellectual problem, if it's going to be solved, it will require a clearer understanding of good and evil. So we're going to have to go deeper into understanding what is good and evil. If you've noticed, David Hume didn't really give us a good definition. He kind of went off into evil as pain and pleasure, or the good and evil is measured in terms of pain and pleasure. And we got moral and natural evil in the free will solution, but we don't understand why free will leads to moral evil. So we need to go deeper in our understanding of good and evil. So that's where we're going to start in this solution. Again, I would like you to take notes, and I would like you to know the definition of good and evil in the ironic solution. So let's talk about good first. Also, this is giving us a heads up about ethics. We're kind of going to lead from here into ethics. So this starts with this. The good for humans as rational beings is the use of reason to the fullest. All right? Good for a being is based on the nature of a being. Human beings are fundamentally rational, so good for humans is the use of reason, and not just a little bit, to the fullest. Now, in theism, reason is used to understand the nature of the world, and the nature of the world as created reveals the nature of God. So the good for humans is the knowledge of God in theism. Now, I would like you to ask your theist friends, or if you are a theist, consider this. Is the good the knowledge of God? Man's chief end is to glorify God. How do you glorify God? You have to know God. Eternal life is knowing God, says Jesus in the New Testament. So good is the knowledge of God. And you know God through God revealing himself in the world. Okay? Evil in theism. In the ironic solution, I should say. Evil for man as a rational being is the failure to use reason to the fullest. So if the good for a being is according to the nature of a being, evil for a being is what is contrary to the nature of a being. Humans are rational beings, so evil is the failure to use reason to the fullest. It is the failure to understand the nature of things. Evil, therefore, is the failure to know God. The good is knowing God. Evil is the failure to know God. And it comes in degrees. Evil does. It is to neglect, avoid, resist, or deny reason in the face of what is clear about God. So remember, early on, we said general revelation is what can be known about God by all people everywhere. That's what's clear about God. And we said that special revelation is necessary because there's moral evil in the denial of what is clear about God. And it comes in levels. It comes in degrees. First, neglect. Maybe it just didn't occur to us to think about the nature of reality. We never asked that question. And then maybe it's brought to our attention and we avoid the question. We avoid facing the question of ultimate reality. And we can't avoid it forever, and so we begin to resist the question. And maybe we resist people who bring the question with informal fallacies, name-calling, slander, And then the next level is denying reason. This is the depths of moral evil. You deny reason, the laws of thought. Get rid of reason so I don't have to think about it. And those who deny reason the most are those who have had to deal with theism. David Hume, Friedrich Nietzsche. Did I tell you Friedrich Nietzsche's father was a pastor? So look at those skeptics, atheists, who are the most outspoken, and see, are these denying reason to avoid this question about what is clear about God? So that's moral evil. Okay, now, why would God allow moral evil? That's odd, right? And it can't just be free will, because free will didn't explain it all the way. So here's I'm going to tell you a story, and the story is meant to illustrate why God would allow moral evil in the world. And the story is the parable of the prodigal son. The parable of the prodigal son comes from the New Testament. I believe it's in the Gospel of Luke, and it has relevance for this discussion because it should help us to see why God allows evil to happen. So a parable is a story about something more than the story. There's a father who raises his two sons, with the good in mind. He has a younger son and an older son. And he raises them with the good. And when they grow up, the younger son comes to the father and asks him for his share of the inheritance. Now, usually a person doesn't get the inheritance until the parent dies. So this is kind of an odd request because the father's still alive. Another odd part of the request is that the inheritance is land. So the father has to split the inheritance between the two sons. And so he probably has to sell land to do this. But he gives the younger son his portion of the inheritance. And the younger son takes his money and goes to a distant land. And he squanders his money there in riotous living, whatever that is. I'll let you use your imagination. But he gets involved in some bad things. And he spends all his money. And he also, at that time, finds himself in the midst of a famine in the land. There's no food. So he's got no money and no food. And so he has to hire himself out to the locals, and he has to feed their pigs. And in his culture, pigs are unclean animals. So here he is, a wealthy person who is now feeding pigs, and he's hungry, and he longs to feed himself with the food he's feeding pigs. He's willing to eat slop at this point. He's starving. In this condition of hitting rock bottom, the young man remembers his father's household and reconsiders. He says, you know what? The servants in my father's household are living way better than I am right now. I should return to my father's household and ask him to make me into one of his hired servants. So I'm going to pause here and go back to the household and tell you about the father. The father he cares about his son, loves his son, and is concerned with his well-being. From time to time, he goes out and looks down the street to see if his son's returning because he hopes he'll return one day. So one day he goes out, and I should also tell you, all the people in the household, the servants in the household, know about this. They know about the son going off and squandering his, there's rumors, let's just say. They know, and they see that the father really loves his son. So one day he goes out to the driveway and he sees his son returning. Now I'm going to change the story here and there. I'm going to play with it, so you have to think critically. So maybe I'm going to tell the story wrong. You have to think about it. So the son runs up to the father, and the father greets the son, and the son says, "Father, forgive me, for I have sinned against heaven and I've sinned against you. Please forgive me and make me into one of your hired servants." Now, think about this. It would be just, it would even be merciful for the father to make him into a servant. It would be just for the father to turn his back on this son. because the son turned his back on the father, right? But the father doesn't do that. The father greets the son, hugs him, and says, no way, and we're not going to make you into one of the hired servants. Put the cloak on him. Put the signet ring. This is like the family crest. Put the signet ring on him, and let's kill the fatted calf and celebrate, for my son was lost, and now he's found. He was dead, and now he's alive. So they celebrate. But remember, there's an older brother. So the older brother was working in the fields, and he comes back and he hears this celebrating, and he asks one of the servants, what's going on? What's all the celebration about? And the servant says, your brother has returned and they're having a celebration for him. Well, the older brother refuses to go into the celebration. And so the father comes out and asks the older son, why won't you come in and celebrate? Your brother was lost and now he's found. He was dead and now he's alive. The older brother says, Father, I've been slaving away for you for my whole life, and you've never once killed the fatted calf for me and my friends. And the father says, Son, everything I own is yours. And that's the end of the story. So what's this story really about? So you have two sons and a father. The father represents God. The two sons represent two ways humans go and respond. The younger son, those who go and do it their own way, but they reach rock bottom and they return. And the rock bottom is the natural evil. So we're talking about moral evil and natural evil. The older brother are those humans who think that they could work for the father's love. They do all the right stuff. But both sons both miss what the good is. They both miss that the knowledge of God is the good. The younger son thinks pleasure is the good. The older son thinks doing his duty is the good, but they miss the good. Now, one of these sons comes to realize the good. The younger one does. And he comes to realize the good through suffering. So remember, the question is, why is there moral evil? It says, consider the parable of the prodigal son. I just told you the parable. And now we could use that parable to describe why there's moral evil. So I'm going to ask you the question, why is there moral evil? And we're going to see the solution is in here for moral evil, the explanation for moral evil. So I'm going to ask you that question. And it says moral evil serves two purposes. So here's the answer. 1, evil as unbelief. So moral evil is unbelief about the good, about the knowledge of God as the good. They don't believe that. Evil as unbelief serves to obscure the revelation for the one who's in it, obscure the revelation of the divine nature. So the person who's in unbelief can't see subjectively. They can't see the existence and nature of God because they aren't searching for it. They're searching for something else. He was searching for pleasure. So evil as unbelief serves to obscure the revelation of the divine nature for the person in it. The younger son, living daily with his father, had a clear revelation of his father's love, yet he failed to see it because of his unbelief about what is good. So he believes pleasure is the good, so he can't understand what the good really is. He has unbelief about the good is the knowledge of God. So moral evil serves to, 1, obscure the revelation of the divine nature, subjectively for the one in that condition. But there's another purpose God allows moral evil, and that is evil as unbelief serves to deepen the revelation of the divine nature for those who are seeking to know. So let's go back to the story. Remember the household and all the servants who knew the father loved his son before he came home. What do they think now after the father has received his son back and forgiven him? Their understanding of the father's love for the son is going to be deepened. So evil serves to deepen the revelation of the divine nature for those who are paying attention objectively. So it subjectively obscures the revelation for the person in unbelief, and it objectively deepens the revelation of the divine nature for those who are not in unbelief, for believers. The sequence of events brought about by unbelief deepens the revelation of divine justice and mercy. So let's pause and think about this a little bit more. If the Father's forgiving his son, he's showing him mercy. But he had the option to not forgive the son, to turn his back on the son. That would have been just, right? And the story is not just about two sons and their father, it's about human beings and God. So, for human beings who know God and seek the good as the knowledge of God, the existence of unbelief in the world will deepen their understanding of God's justice and mercy. So why does God allow moral evil? To obscure the revelation and to deepen the revelation. Now notice, there are two parts to this solution. Once there's moral evil in the world, God allows moral evil. Moral evil is brought about by humans not seeking God, not understanding who God is, not doing what is right because of that. God could leave them in that condition. But God doesn't leave them in that condition. He brings them out. Once moral evil is in the world, how do you get rid of it, though? How does God get rid of it? So there's two parts. If evil or unbelief is removed quickly, abruptly, then the revelation of the divine nature will not be deepened. So let's use the story. Let's say the young man asked for his inheritance, set out, and that first evening pitched his tent, and he's alone, and he's on foot, and he's got gold, and he starts to think about his condition. He could be robbed by bandits. Perhaps he can be stung by a scorpion and die. Or maybe he just misses his mother's cooking, and he decides that evening to go back home. And he goes back home, gives his money back to the father and says, "Dad, I don't really want my inheritance. I was just checking." And he continues living at home. Is his understanding going to be deepened of his father's love? No, he's still going to have this view of the good, that the good is pleasure. He's just too scared to go pursue it. So he has to go through this process. If he doesn't go, it's not going to be deepened. So if moral evil doesn't, if moral evil is removed abruptly, God comes down and saves humans quickly from moral evil, then the revelation of his justice and mercy isn't going to be deepened. If evil or unbelief is not removed at all, then the revelation of God's justice and mercy won't be seen. So, if evil is allowed to go side by side with good forever, then we won't have a deepening of the revelation of who God is in terms of his justice and mercy. So think about the story again. If the young man takes his inheritance, goes off, squanders it in riotous living, ends up dying in the pigsty of starvation, he won't know how much his father loved him because he won't go through that process of coming home and asking for forgiveness and being forgiven. So if he dies in the pigsty, the revelation of his father's love won't be deepened. So once moral evil enters the world, if it's not removed at all, the revelation of God's mercy won't be seen. Okay, so what's the solution? Once moral evil is in the world, the solution is to remove it gradually. And this is how God rules in the world. Unbelief in every form and in every degree of combination with belief is allowed to work itself out in world history. In this conflict, good eventually overcomes evil. And then it says, consider worldview conflicts in world history. So all those views we had on the square of opposition, theism versus non-theism, belief versus unbelief, those are being worked out in world history, in actual human lives. And in this conflict, good will overcome evil eventually. Now, in theism, these correspond theologically to different views of the end. So there are three end time theories. One is called pre-millennialism. It's often what you see in the Left Behind series, or Jesus is coming soon, all these predictions. That's evil being removed abruptly. God's going to come and save his people really quickly and, beat all his enemies. It doesn't seem like that would help with deepening the revelation of his justice and mercy. The other view, evil is not removed, is consistent with what's called amillennialism. Good and evil go side by side, and you don't know when the end will come. The end could come at any moment. But there's no good overcoming evil. There's no victory. And so the third view is to let evil be removed gradually in this conflict with unbelief. And this is called postmillennialism. And it's the view that God returns, or the end of history comes when good overcomes evil. So just a little theological correlation if you're wondering about end times. So you can talk to your friends about that. Is the end when good overcomes evil? Must it be? Is that consistent with deepening the revelation of who God is, and the good being the knowledge of God? All right, so look at this. The assumptions of this solution are this. This solution assumes the clarity of general revelation. It's clear that God exists, and there's no other way to deepen the revelation of God's justice and mercy than to allow moral evil to happen and to remove it gradually. And it assumes the good as the knowledge of God justifies evil. So if the good is knowing God and allowing moral evil deepens our knowledge of God, then that's why God lets it happen. All right, I'll let you think about it, see if that's satisfying to you. But we have to answer, why is there natural evil? And I'm seeing we're going a little bit long, so I'm going to pause and pick up in the next video with why is there natural evil? All right, what we did today was we went over why is there moral evil? And we said evil is allowed to obscure the revelation, deepen the revelation, and it's removed gradually. And the good is the knowledge of God, and this deepens the knowledge of God. So I'm going to pause here. Next time, why is there natural evil in the ironic solution?